The alien delegation arrived in orbit at precisely 1342 Eastern Standard Time, though time had little meaning to them. Their vessel, the Varelian research cruiser Tralik, parked politely above Earth's atmosphere like a visitor unsure whether to knock. After several weeks of monitored transmissions, cautious data gathering, and a diplomatic green light from the United Nations, the Tralik finally received permission to send down a landing party. Inside the descending vessel's sterile decontamination chamber, Specialist Yarla adjusted his hazmat suit for the third time. The amber-tinted visor fogged slightly as he exhaled. "Containment integrity confirmed," muttered Yarla, his voice muffled through the translator unit embedded in his suit's collar. Across from him, researcher Mivix was already sealed inside an identical suit, awkwardly trying to scratch an itch on his shoulder through 3 layers of polymer shielding. The human specimen reported nasal discharge and intermittent coughing. "This is a respiratory pathogen, is it not? Should we not increase the shielding on the lower filtration unit?" Yarla double-checked the readings on his wrist scanner. "I already reinforced the lower vent with a triple-layer particulate mesh. We'll be fine as long as we don't remove our helmets." The drop pod hissed as it landed in a designated clearing near a forestry outpost in Pennsylvania. The humans had given strict coordinates, though the so-called host had only agreed to meet reluctantly. His name was Yarik Hensley, a forestry worker selected due to his isolated location and recent minor illness. Yarla stepped out first, boots crunching softly on frost-covered leaves. Mivix followed, his gait stiff and cautious. A wooden cabin stood about 20 meters ahead, smoke curling lazily from its chimney. The door creaked open, and a lanky man in his 30s with shaggy brown hair and a red flannel shirt stepped out onto the porch, holding a ceramic mug in one hand and a box of tissues in the other. "You the ones from the sky?" he asked, sniffing and wiping his nose with the tissue. Mivix took a cautious step back. "Please do not approach. You are actively symptomatic." Yarik squinted at him. "You mean the cold?" "Yeah. Bit of a sore throat and the usual sniffling." "Ain't nothing crazy." Yarla raised his scanner, watching it beep softly. Body temperature elevated by 1.1 degrees. Increased mucus production. Cough reflex detected. Confirmed, respiratory virus. Initiating emergency containment protocol. Before Yarik could respond, Mivix hit a button on his belt. A shimmering energy barrier sprang up between them and the cabin, isolating the human within a glowing semicircle. "What the hell?" Yarik stepped back, sloshing some of his coffee onto the porch. "You are infected," Mivix said firmly. "We are initiating level 4 quarantine procedures. It's a cold." Yarik raised an eyebrow. "Like, the common cold?" Yarla turned to Mivix. "We did not find any known vaccine. The virus mutates too rapidly." "Correct," Mivix replied. "An adaptive, highly resilient pathogen. Earth's biosphere is hostile beyond all projections." Yarik coughed into his elbow and shook his head. "You two are dressed like you're walking into a nuclear meltdown. You don't need all that. Just grab some tissues." Yarla tilted his head. "Tissues?" Yarik pointed at the box in his hand. "Yeah, for the nose. Blow it. Toss it. Done." Mivix exchanged a glance with Yarla. "That is the extent of Earth's containment strategy?" Yarik shrugged. "More or less. Drink some tea, rest, maybe watch a documentary about penguins. You'll be fine in a few days." Mivix stared at the tissue box like it was a weaponized relic. "Would you like one?" Yarik offered, holding the box out. "Do not approach." Mivix barked, backing into a tree. Yarla extended a mechanical grabber from his belt, carefully taking one tissue from the box and sealing it inside a containment tube. "We must study this," he murmured. Yarik frowned. "You're seriously worried about a cold?" Mivix replied, "We have never encountered a virus capable of infecting over half the global population within a single rotation. The implications are catastrophic." Yarik leaned against the porch post and shook his head. "You should see what it does to kids. They turn into little snot fountains. But they survive." Yarla opened his wrist pad and began streaming data back to the Tralik. "Recommend full atmospheric scan. Determine aerosol spread and particulate travel range." Suddenly, Yarik sneezed loud, wet, and utterly unrestrained. Mivix screamed and dove behind a bush. Yarla staggered back, raising both arms. "Airborne discharge. Alert the vessel." Yarik wiped his nose. "That one snuck up on me. Sorry." 3 seconds later, The trolley triggered a full-sector bioshield around the area, causing a mild electromagnetic disruption that knocked out cable television across 5 counties. Yarik's kettle inside the cabin exploded. 2 hours later, Yarik sat in a folding chair inside a translucent dome made of trolley polymer, drinking lukewarm tea while trying to ignore the buzzing of drones scanning the mucus samples he'd deposited into 3 different containment dishes. "Do you people always overreact like this?" he asked. Yarla looked up from a tablet. "This virus has survived every sterilization simulation we've run. It breaks down in 70 minutes under direct plasma exposure, but only after the host cells are entirely consumed." Yarik blinked. "That's not how we do things. We just wait it out." Mivix tapped on his own screen. "Your immune system adapts to this." "Usually," Yarik said, "unless it turns into bronchitis. Or whatever that thing was I had in college that made me cough for a month." Yarla turned to him slowly. "You survived that." "Yeah. Missed finals, though." Mivix whispered, "This species is terrifying." Yarik sighed, setting his tea down. "Look, I get that your kind doesn't deal with illness the same way, but this is just part of life here. We catch colds. Sometimes the flu. We get better." Yarla frowned. "Your species appears to accept suffering as routine." Yarik gave a tired chuckle. "You try paying rent in Pennsylvania during winter without getting sick." As night fell, the trolley sent down a mobile lab unit the size of a small RV. Yarik was asked politely but insistently to allow blood samples, throat swabs, and an MRI. The MRI was a disaster. The alien version of the machine spun too fast, and the magnetic field caused Yarik's fillings to ache for hours. "They don't even have Advil," he muttered, rubbing his jaw. Yarla offered him a glowing blue paste. "This is our analgesic. It will numb the pain centers in your cranial region." Yarik sniffed it. "Smells like burnt celery. Apply it under your eyelids." He stared. "I'm not doing that." By the 4th day, Yarik's symptoms began to subside. His voice returned, his nose stopped running, and the aliens finally calmed down enough to retract the bioshield. Mivix observed him carefully as he blew his nose and tossed the tissue into a trash bag. "You have fully recovered?" "Pretty much. No scarring, no organ damage." Yarik shook his head. "Just a bit tired." Mivix looked at Yarla. "We require further observation." Yarik groaned. "I'm not staying here another week. It is not safe to release you. You may be a carrier." Yarik stood up slowly. "Look, you came here to learn, right? So learn this: our bodies fight off stuff all the time. Not because we're better, but because we have to. We don't have space labs or bioshields. We've got tissues and soup." Yarla blinked. "And somehow that works." Yarik nodded. "Most of the time." Mivix sat down, staring at the ground. "We came prepared for a biological apocalypse. We thought we'd be facing a hyper-aggressive microbe that liquefies organs." Yarik picked up the tissue box and shook it. "Turns out, this is how we fight back." The aliens left the next morning, taking over 600 biological samples and a box of tissues sealed in a vacuum container. As the drop pod lifted into the sky, Yarik leaned on his porch railing, sipping his fresh coffee and watching the clouds part around the ascending ship. He sneezed once more. "Better take 2 boxes," he muttered. The trolley returned 2 weeks later. Not to the cabin this time. Yarik had made it abundantly clear that he didn't want another bioshield collapsing his kettle or draining the neighbor's solar panels, but to a regional medical center outside Scranton. It was a squat, beige building that smelled vaguely of antiseptic and bad vending machine coffee, and it had exactly 6 parking spots that weren't already taken. They didn't land in any of those. The Treleek's medical shuttle simply hovered above the staff lot, extending a padded ramp that flattened 3 parked sedans. One had a "My Kid is an Honor Student" sticker, which was now upside down and partially embedded in the ramp's undercarriage. Inside the hospital's east wing, Yarik sat in a narrow examination room, legs dangling off the edge of a paper-covered exam table. He wore a hospital gown that didn't quite close in the back, and a pair of mismatched socks because he hadn't expected an interplanetary house call. A nurse had taken his blood pressure twice, frowned, and left without saying anything. The door opened with a click hiss. 2 Trolleys stepped in. Yarik recognized one of them, Yarla, still tall and vaguely insectoid beneath the polished containment suit, though this time the helmet was sleeker, with a reflective faceplate that shimmered like oil in sunlight. The other alien was shorter, with thicker limbs and a pack of vials strapped across its chest like a bandolier. Without preamble, the shorter one stepped forward and extended a tongue depressor toward Yarik's mouth. Whoa, personal space. Yarik leaned back against the wall. You gotta ask before you start poking inside people. Requesting oral cavity access, the alien said, retracting the depressor and holding it up like a peace offering. Duration, 17 seconds. Still weird, Yarik muttered, opening his mouth anyway. The alien leaned in, peered at his tonsils, and made a clicking noise that Yarla translated on his wrist pad as non-critical inflammation with residual lymphatic response. Yarik pulled back. So like, normal. Yarla nodded or something like it. Your immune response resolved the infection without pharmacological aid. This remains statistically improbable. I drank some lemon tea and slept 12 hours. That's not wizardry. The shorter alien turned, unhooked a vial from its chest, and held it up to the overhead light. Inside was a cloudy sample of mucus, swirling gently. That's disgusting, Yarik said. It is beautiful, the alien replied. Yarla stepped closer to the wall and tapped the screen embedded beside the sink. It flickered to life, showing a rotating 3D model of Yarik's nasal cavity. We have replicated your upper respiratory system using synthetic tissues. The virus behaves differently in our simulations. How so? It fails to trigger enough immune markers to self-limit. The system collapses within hours. So your fake nose can't handle a cold? Yarla paused. Correct. Yarik crossed his arms. Guess that makes me the gold standard of nostrils. We require more data, Yarla said. Specifically in high variability environments. Yarik blinked. Meaning? The shorter alien pulled out a data pad and held it up. It displayed a schedule. You want me to go hiking in a thunderstorm? Precisely. No, Yarla adjusted a setting on his wrist pad. We will also monitor your exposure to allergens, dry air, urban pollution, and emotional stressors. A complete resilience profile. You could have just asked me to walk through New Jersey during rush hour. The shorter alien perked up. Is that a designated stress zone? It's more of a life choice, Yarik muttered. 20 minutes later, Yarik was standing in the hospital parking lot, holding a paper cup of orange Gatorade and glaring at a drone the size of a microwave that hovered 2 feet from his face. It hummed, scanned, and occasionally released a puff of mist that smelled like eucalyptus. We are now beginning Phase 1, Yarla announced from a safe distance, tapping commands into a tablet. Please breathe normally. Another drone zipped in, carrying a tray of items, a feather, a cloth soaked in vinegar, a jar of glitter, and a small kitten. What the hell is this? Multi-sensory irritants, Yarla said. We will observe your body's response. The kitten meowed and tried to climb into Yarik's hood. Okay, you're testing my sneeze threshold with props from a kindergarten classroom. Got it. The feather brushed his cheek. Nothing happened. The vinegar cloth passed under his nose. He winced. Ugh, that's awful. The glitter jar exploded. Hey, Yarik batted at the shimmering cloud. You trying to blind me? The kitten began licking his ear. Your ocular moisture increased, noted the shorter alien. Tear ducts activated. Because there's glitter in my cornea. Fascinating. That night, Yarik was escorted to a hotel outfitted with Trollic environmental controls. They had taken over the entire top floor and replaced the HVAC system with a unit capable of simulating 17 different planetary atmospheres. Yarik's room was humid, lime-scented, and faintly glowing. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling while a voice from a speaker listed his heart rate every 20 seconds. Yarla, he called. A panel on the wall shimmered. Yarla's face appeared. Yes. Do you guys ever get bored? We do not experience that state. Because I'm bored. And itchy. And everything smells like lime popsicles. This is the optimal humidity for viral resistance. I already resisted the virus. Repetition ensures reliability. Yarik sighed and rolled over. You ever think maybe your simulations are failing because they're missing something obvious? Such as, like the fact that humans don't just fight viruses with biology. We fight them with stubbornness, and complaining, and soup. You can't model that. We are attempting to. Yarik closed his eyes. Good luck modeling soup. By morning, the room had shifted to a dry alpine setting. Yarik's lips cracked, and his skin felt like sandpaper. He shuffled into the main lab room, where Yarla and the shorter alien now identified as Troll were preparing a new test. What now? Yarik asked, rubbing his arms. We will simulate emotional strain while exposing you to minor allergens, Troll said. This will assess psychosomatic influences on immune performance. How do you simulate emotional strain? A door opened. A woman walked in. Early 50s, sharp eyes, clipboard in hand. Yarik Hensley, she said. I'm from the Pennsylvania Department of Health. We need to talk about your insurance forms. Yarik's eyes widened. No. How did you even find me? She is a cognitive stress catalyst, Yarla explained. We hired her. You hired a state administrator? She was enthusiastic. The woman smiled. You failed to submit your treatment record from last December's urgent care visit. That constitutes a billing discrepancy. Yarik backed toward the door. I'd rather get sick again. You also listed freelance lumber consultant under occupation. That's not a recognized employment category. I was between jobs. Your co-pay was miscalculated by $12. Troll tapped his scanner. Heart rate elevated. Pupil dilation. Subject is perspiring. Yarik threw a towel over the scanner. Experiment complete, Yarla said. Conclusion, emotional stress impairs resistance. No kidding, Yarik muttered, slumping into a chair. Later that afternoon, Yarik was released from testing. He stood in the parking lot again, this time holding a brown paper bag with a sandwich inside and a voucher for one free eye wash. Yarla approached. You have contributed significantly to our understanding, he said. Your resilience exceeds our projections. Because I didn't die from a cold? Because you endured glitter, vinegar, a state bureaucrat, and a simulated tax audit with minimal tissue degeneration. Yarik took a bite of his sandwich. Welcome to Earth. Yarla paused. Would you consider joining our Resilience Symposium next month? Will there be soup? Yes. Then I'm in. By the time the Tralik held their symposium, the human cold had become a galactic curiosity. Yarik arrived just before noon in what appeared to be a repurposed conference center, now hovering several hundred meters above the Appalachian foothills. The exterior shimmered like brushed steel, but the interior was more convention hall than spaceship. Rows of low tables, soft blue lighting, and a ceiling that pulsated faintly like a calm heartbeat. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, which Yarik suspected was an attempt at making Earth guests feel comforted. It was mostly just weird. He was escorted to a central dais by a floating orb with a pleasant chime for a voice and a tendency to hover slightly too close to his left ear. Please remain centered for biometric syncing, it warbled. Sure. But if this ends with another glitter cloud, I'm walking out. The orb blinked green and zipped away. Around the hall, dozens of Tralik and affiliated species were already seated. Some adjusted their filtration masks. Others wore layered garments that shifted color in slow ripples. A few tapped at transparent slates suspended in midair. Every eye or approximation thereof turned toward Yarik as he took his place. Yarla stood to one side of the dais, flanked by several figures in ceremonial robes made of overlapping membranes that rustled like drying leaves when they moved. We welcome the subject of the resilience study, Yarla said, raising one of his upper limbs in a gesture somewhere between a wave and a salute. You could just say Yarik, he replied. Or, guy with the immune system that made your computers cry. A ripple of amused clicks passed through the audience. Troll stepped forward, holding a curved device that resembled a violin missing its strings. We will now present our findings. The lights dimmed. A projection filled the air above them. A cross-section of Yarik's nasal cavity rendered in unsettling detail. Tiny particles flowed through it in slow motion, colliding with cells, triggering responses, and eventually collapsing into harmless debris. Do we need to watch my nose in IMAX? Yarik muttered. Troll gestured to a side panel. We constructed over 19,000 microbial simulations. None matched the organic outcome. The key variable was not cellular behavior. It was behavioral behavior. You mean me drinking tea and watching penguin documentaries? Correct, Troll said. Also, your decision to consume citrus, maintain moderate hydration, and refrain from attempting to sterilize your environment. Yarik raised an eyebrow. You mean not bleaching my entire house? Indeed. Your species' instinct to endure rather than eliminate may be the most effective containment strategy. Yarla added. You did not attempt aggressive intervention. You allowed discomfort. You trusted time. Because I didn't have a choice, Yarik said. We don't have the tech to vaporize viruses midair. We've got couch blankets and patience. A tall, Segmented delegate from a race Yarik hadn't seen before stood. Its translator buzzed softly. Then your survival was improvisational. That's one way to put it, Yarik said. We don't beat illness by outsmarting it. We just outlast it. Gripe about it, sure. But we keep going. Another alien, this one with translucent skin and a visible skeletal structure, raised a limb. Your people have cultivated endurance as culture. Yarik nodded. Because we had to. You ever try raising toddlers during flu season? That's like living in a petri dish with legs. The skeletal alien blinked slowly. We are beginning to suspect your resilience is not biological but philosophical. Try telling that to someone with a sinus infection. A pause followed. Then, slowly, one of the robed Trollik approached. He carried a tray with what looked like a steaming bowl of soup, a folded blanket, and a small, unopened pack of tissues. We wish to honor your cultural protocol, he said. Yarik stared. You brought me chicken noodle soup? Simulated, the Trollik replied. Derived from molecular scans of a kin labeled low sodium. I'll allow it. He took the bowl, sat cross-legged on the dais, and began to eat. It was lukewarm and slightly metallic, but not bad. The tissues were real, though a familiar comfort in a room full of aliens who had once quarantined his cabin over a sneeze. As he ate, several attendees lined up to ask questions. One wanted to know how humans handled infectious disease in zero gravity. Another asked if emotions influenced immune recovery. A third inquired if there were recorded instances of humans willingly exposing themselves to viruses for scientific study. Yeah, Yarik said. We call them college freshmen. Laughter real, resonant, strange rippled through the room. Even the orb hovering at the edge of the hall emitted a delighted jingle. Hours passed. Delegates debated, theorized, compared data. Troll demonstrated a new prototype tissue that monitored mucus composition in real time. Yarla presented a chart showing that human cold recovery rates remained statistically stable even in high-stress environments, something they'd previously thought impossible. Eventually, the session closed. Yarik stood, stretched, and handed the soup bowl back to the ceremonial Trollik, who bowed as if accepting a sacred relic. Anything else you want to poke, scan, or swab? Yarik asked. Yarla shook his head. You have given more than enough. Glad to hear it. I've got a weekend plan that involves zero glitter experiments. Troll stepped forward. We have one final request. Does it require a nasal swab? No. Just this. He handed Yarik a small, clear cube. Inside floated a perfectly preserved tissue folded and used, suspended in an antiseptic gel. Yarik blinked. You're giving me a trophy? A monument, Troll corrected. To commemorate the moment we realized, survival is not always about domination. Sometimes, it's just about holding on. Yarik held the cube up, watching the tissue flutter gently inside. I'll put it on my shelf, he said. Right next to my unpaid medical bills. The orb chimed once more. Transport ready. Returning subject to terrestrial coordinates. As the platform lowered toward the earth below, Yarik sat with the cube in his lap and a faint breeze brushing past his shoulders. Somewhere beyond the clouds, 1,000 alien minds were recalibrating their understanding of resilience not as a weapon, but as a way of being. And back on Earth, somewhere in a dusty drawer, a half-empty tissue box waited for its next turn in the spotlight.